I'm Dave Scott from the Norfolk Hub, and in 2009 I had the opportunity to sit with Ike and interview him about his war experience, and from that we've become pretty good friends, and I get up once in a while and have tea with him, and I've learned a lot about Ike and his life, and to have an opportunity to sit here today and let Ike talk a little bit about his history with the rest of you is an amazing opportunity. I want to thank you for allowing us to do this. And I think probably the best start we could do, Ike, is you were telling me earlier your family had a farm on just off the Cockshot in Port Dover, right?
Yeah.
Were you a child when you grew up? When you grew up, right?
Yes, yeah.
And then from there, you were telling me you worked at the Woolen Mill?
I went back to, I was working on the farms for a few years, and then I went into the mill and stayed there until I joined up.
Until you joined up, and that was 1940?
Yeah, the Woolen Mill there.
And you went out to Calgary to train, correct? Was it Calgary where you guys trained?
Went to Calgary was our first skip from Toronto, and there we put. Unfortunately, they weren't ready for us. They didn't have any place for us to sleep, and finally they turned what was a teacher's place, and they turned them out and put us in. And we had beds that were just jammed right into, and you went over top of them to get out.
Until
they built up a lot of stuff there finally.
And then you were off to England, and I think you said you went across. Would you guys go across in a liner, luxury liner, or is it at the time?
Yes, we did. We went to a Polish liner. Yeah. And had a battleship between us and another ship. And that's the way we rode all the way to Scotland.
Yeah. And when I know you and I have talked, and when you arrived there, I mean, you guys went down to London, and the bombs were falling then, weren't they?
Yes, that night. We posted to this place in London, and we were there for about 3 weeks. And we had bombers every night, 8 o'clock.
It's just a constant.
Yep.
And I think earlier we were talking as well, and is that when you met your wife? Is that when you met Kay?
The which?
Is that when you met your wife, just before the war then?
No, I met her after.
After?
Yeah, after we were at a new place.
Oh, okay.
And we were just on a weekend when
you were on a weekend?
When I met her, yeah.
You guys were out causing some trouble, I imagine.
No problem.
And from there, where were you stationed in? Talk a little bit about, I mean, I know you had 5 missions, correct? You flew 5 missions in the Lancaster.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
well, we were stationed right near the North Sea, so we were hanging, because every time you go out overseas, over friends or that, we always come back through that. In fact, shortly after we moved in there, they lost 80 aircraft one night.
80 aircraft
coming up. It was a mistake of changing. They thought in the river of the. Sorry, I'm getting strong. They were told what it was like, but the winds changed, and they all flew in the wrong place.
And I know when we did your story, one of the things you told me about that day of your 5th mission, you went to your locker to get out your parachute.
Yeah.
And maybe explain what happened there.
Somebody broke my locker and took my harness away that you have put on because it was perfect. you go to the place where all they are, and they test you out and hang it in your own place. And when I get to mine, it was open and they'd gone away. So I had to go back and get one, and I couldn't get one that would be for about somebody about 6'5", and I had to just pull it as tight as I could, and when I bailed out, I felt it all the way down.
And you guys in that mission, what you explained to me was that was a daylight bombing mission. You guys were like the last plane to go in, middle of the day, so the enemy was ready for you.
There were 46 aircraft, and we went to bomb the battleships, German battleships in Brest. And two were sitting quite close together, and one was separate. We got the separate one with, we were carrying 5,000-pound armor-piercing bombs. And the one we hit was right on the back of the ship, and you could see the smoke just go right up like that. And the other two got hit, but didn't do much good.
And you guys were and at the same time this is going on, I mean, the German aircraft are attacking you guys as well, correct?
Well,
and you're getting hit as well.
The Germans left it for quite a while, and then they run them back to Germany. And after a few months, both of them were sunk in the Atlantic.
Yeah, but when you were taking, when you guys were taking flak, when you guys were getting hit, there was German planes in the area at the time. Like, what hit your plane? Can you talk a little bit about that? And I know that was quite a moment for you.
Yes, it was. When you get three different three different people going at it, and you don't know them, but they bombed up, went up ahead of us, bombed up, and we were hit 3 times. And as we turned to go back home, we couldn't. All the equipment was gone, and we couldn't turn a thing. And the aircraft just kept going on, and he was heading south rather than northeast. And we got. So we lost everything we needed, and all we could do was just sit there. And then 4 of our crewmen were killed, and then another one afterwards, and left 3 of us. And the two Australians went first and left me in, and because I was wanting to see how badly the last 2 were, but I couldn't get to them for the smoke in it.
And the tail cunner was your buddy, wasn't he? The young guy in the tail.
So I just went out and bailed out, and from 16,000 feet, and I thought I was going to get it in the middle of the ocean, when a German come right at me, and then he suddenly come right near to me, and I thought I was going to throw myself, throwing me around quite a bit, and I couldn't do much, and I tried to straighten it up with a line, and then he turned away, and I went on down, and they tell you to jump in about 10 or 100 feet after, when you get rid of your parachute, otherwise it'll come on top of you. And you got in the wood. I thought it was 100 feet, but I went down and I had no shoes on, and I thought I wasn't going to stop going down, and then I opened up some of my equipment and shot me up, and I then was swimming around for 6 hours. So it was dark. About 5 o'clock it was dark, and they picked me up after 6.
It was
6 hours.
It was a French fishing boat, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
They picked you up with some German soldiers on it, I believe.
Yeah.
And I think the other point that you had talked about, and I know that we have talked about it, was just sitting there in the plane, and you were telling me before, like your shoes and socks just get blown off you, like you're just literally sitting there with the plane.
I did. I was sitting with my feet hanging out because I was trying to tighten up this equipment, and I took my shoes off, my socks off, and a little bit cold when I got down in the water.
Was it, I mean, with the whole scenario when you're going through that in the plane, and you know your buddy's in the tail, and it doesn't look good for him, was that one of the harder decisions in your life, to leave him?
Yeah, the two gunners at the back were killed, and the other wireman, same as me, he's gone, and there were just 2 Australians, and they jumped out early, and I was the only one left, but I couldn't do anything because everything was gone from the aircraft, but it kept on flying, and as far as I know, it was heading out for the ocean. Yeah. And nobody's ever heard of it since.
And you're in the ocean, you get picked up by this fishing boat, and you've been in the water 6 hours, and so obviously hypothermia has got to be an issue. You were saying to me you just basically pass out. And
the Germans picked me up. Yep. It was a ship that had that goes around the bay. We were in the Bay of Biscay, and as they tell me, it's always rough. And I got thrown around a long time, and I fell asleep sometime, and I didn't wake up till another 36 hours altogether.
When you're up in that plane, and when everything that can go wrong has gone wrong, did you ever think about dying? Did that ever cross your mind?
No.
No?
No.
Did you know you were going to get through this somehow?
Yeah.
So on this journey, this incredible journey, you're picked up, and what happens after that? I mean, I know that you get interrogated for a few days, and
yes, and then they took us up to the people that shot us down and met some of them, and then they put us on the train and went down to the south of Germany and stayed there for a week, and then they took us out to a horrible place that it was lousy. Fleas were thick, and the beds we had no mattress. We just had wood and one blanket that had seen better days. The food was I fed pigs better than what we got. And we stayed there a year. We all lost a lot of weight. And then they moved us to the north of this place. This place we were in was near the Alps. And then they took us north, and we had a bit better food because we got the Red Cross parcels. And we started to put a little bit more back on our money and on our frame.
Was that around the time when you got your journal?
Hmm?
Was that around the time when you got your journal? Like, didn't that come through Red Cross, your diary?
No, I didn't start the diary till a year after that.
And you're still in the same clothes, right? Like, nothing's changed for you, has it? Like,
No.
and since you've been captured, it's...
Yeah.
And I know you were telling me on one of the train rides north. When you were taking one of the trains north,
yes.
you could... The soldiers didn't want you looking out the windows or at things.
Yeah.
Because of the camps you were seeing at that time.
Yeah, yes.
It's incredible.
Yeah, we had a very rough time there, and we were very glad when we got out, but it was better because they put us in huts. They were crowded, but at least they were all together. And we had 12 people in each one, and I think there were one Australian, 2 Canadians, 2 New Zealanders, and the rest were British people.
How many people would be in that camp? How many soldiers would be in that camp?
Well, there's 7,200.
7,200
of us, yeah.
And what were you eating? Like on a typical day, what would you get to eat?
Well, we made our own eat then. When we got Red Cross, we didn't need their stuff they sent us. It was terrible. And the Red Cross was fine, and we got started to put a little weight back on.
And that was that when you were having the...
And we stayed in that place until 1933.
1943. Yeah.
And then we moved out to Poland.
To Poland.
And we stayed there till pretty well close to the last year of the war.
Was that when you were doing? I know when we were talking earlier today, and we were talking just about what point was it where you were talking when we were talking about the cabbage soup and the bread. Maybe talk a little bit. Maybe the people don't know what was in that bread you were eating, like the stuff that it was crazy what you were eating at that time. Just
well, in England once after the war, I found in the paper, read and said about the British government had sent quite a number of men from there to go through the archives in Belgium, or in Berlin. And this fellow had seen what 2 Germans had been sent to do was to get a new, something new to make up black bread. We'd never seen black bread before and never heard about it. But while we were in England, there was an article in the paper about this fellow, these 2 fellows that went to Germany, and they wrote down this, what should be right for black bread. And I think I can remember it all, was that they said the first 40% was for barley, or for, not barley, but grain anyway, that was not fit for anything else. And so it goes in for this bread. And the next, that was 40%. And the next 20% was a sliced, what do they call that? Excuse me, but I feel I lose things.
The sliced, yeah. And then the last 20% was...
Yeah, they had that. And then they put...
is that the tree flour?
I knew this was going to happen.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, they make that bread, and then they put, they said, they put 20% of, what was it? Oh, God, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. But there was, and I remember you telling me about this, but
Yeah,
one of the main ingredients, maybe you remember what the main ingredients was.
I had it with me. I know it was.
Maybe, but the point was when you went to eat it, what did you pick out of it?
Yeah, there was sawdust. The third, the second, second, what they put in was sawdust. They called it flowers.
Tree flour.
Yeah, and then the last 20% was trees that they gathered up in the woods, and then this was all to make up for black bread. And when we got it, and the loaf was very small, but when you cut it, you could see the sawdust all the way along, and we just scraped it out and had to eat what was left. And this is pretty. I'm sorry about this because things just come to me, and then when you're 96 years old, they can't hold them.
And then the other part was what we were talking about earlier, is that in the camp, you guys sort of had to make your own fun. You guys had to, everybody had to get along, right?
Once we got the Red Cross parcels, then we could make our own fun. But first of all, we had to make our cups out of cans. And we got the cans in the boxes. And you get some milk, and all in cans, and we had to keep the cans for ourselves, and we got handles on them. I've got one at home. I should have brought it in, and that's how we made up our meals. We flattened the cans out, made plates, and that's how we lived for the rest of the time. And that when we were getting the Red Cross, we got nothing from Germany. The soup we got was, I would just say it should have been in a pigsty, not in us.
No,
but once we got a few parcels up, we got it once every week, well, it started to put us a little bit of what we lost in the other place. We stayed in that plant till 1943, and late in 43, and we went up to Poland, and we were put in boxcars. We've never get in a decent train or anything. We were just in boxcars, and we were locked in those. And no matter what you wanted to do, you were locked in. And we got like that. And we got in a small town in Poland, and we were just on the edge of the city. And when we walked from the train to there, we could see these, looked like, we thought it was in Scotland. It looked like we had little huts all along. And we could see these fellows running around, throwing the ball around. When we got there, we found out that what we were looking at were huts that we were going to sleep in. And there was no door on them. There was a floor in them and a roof on them. And we were in there from June until almost to the end of the war. We slept in those places. There were 7 of us had to go in there, and you went in one at a time because there was no room. So you waited till he was ready to go to bed, or to go to sleep, I should say, and then another fellow went in till everybody was there, and the last one out was actually, he could have his arm out, hanging out, whether it rained or not. And for that, we decided that the fellow that's at the door goes back in there the next night, and we all would go down another one. And we were in that till until December. They finally got a place to build, and we put in there. And then on the early February, we were told that we were going on the road, and there were 1,500 of us, and they were counting us this one day, ready to go out and walk, and all at once there's an awful roar. It was right close to us, so close that I could see 2 Russians sitting there, flying down to do some bombing. The bombs were hanging out on the bottom. You could see them all. And we all run and got back in the hut. And then within 2 or 3 minutes, you could hear bombs going down. And they bombed the Germans who had a big place there for people coming back from Russia. They could stop in there. Well, they blew that all up, and a few aircraft too. And then we were still they put us in, we stayed in till night. But one aircraft got a little bit off the way, because he dropped a bomb and it broke the glass in our window, but that was as far as it went. But at 5 o'clock in the morning, they got us up, and they didn't bother counting us this time. They just took us. And it was very cold. Northeast winds blowing there, and most of us had no more clothes than what I'm on now, except my jacket. And we were given a package that had a couple of pieces of bread, very small, and something called honey, like a little bar, and they gave us that. And that was what we got. And then we started out to march. And most days we never got anything at all. Occasionally, if we stopped at a place with a barn, well, the first 500 might have got in the barn, and if there's hay there or straw, well, they could get a good rest. the rest of you got an armful of hay or straw, whatever there was, and go out and find a place where the wind isn't blowing, and sit down on the straw and sit there and hope to God you wake up in the morning. And that's all. That was like that all the way through. And we tried to get food, but they never had much. And we kept on like that for 3 weeks. And we were all getting pretty well beaten, seeing things you shouldn't see that weren't actually there. And then they pulled us into to a big yard, and there was all kinds of box and train stuff in there. They took and put us, the whole bunch of us, and they put us in 60 in a boxcar, a German boxcar, which were mostly French, that used to be in the First World War. They were the same ones. And when you get 60 in them, you can't all sit down at once. And a lot of us had started to get dysentery, which you know what dysentery is. It's the grandfather of diarrhea. and believe me, it's terrible. And they wouldn't stop for us to go into a ditch. No, we just had to go and let it run down your leg and into your shoes. And we were marching like that for the last 2 weeks. And we got into this yard, and they put 60 of us in one of these boxes, and we sat there for 3 days, and we pounded on the doors. They locked us in. And we had nothing to eat, nothing to drink, and you can imagine the mess it was inside. And the third day, they started out and took us to, well, we didn't know where we were going, but they stopped the train and got out and said it was only 2 miles to the next this place that we're going to be. And when we got up to the gate, they wouldn't let us in. And we didn't know that, but there was already 70,000 people in that place that had never been like that before. And so we were a lot of the fellows were just laying on the road. They were too beat and in a mess. And the boss of the Germans kept saying, "No, you can't come in, you can't come in." And somebody said, "Well, these fellows are just about half dead." Well, it didn't make any sense. Along come a doctor, an English doctor. He wasn't very big, but he'd taken a parachute in with the army into Hollywood, in Hollywood. And he said, he went down the road and looked at the fellows and said what a bad shape they were in. And so he come back and told the German, he said, "You either get some place for these people to clean themselves and rest, or," he said, "I'll hold you to what you've done when the war is over." And he said, "It's not long to go." And so they turned around. Then he was mad as blazes, and he sent 100 of us up to get a shower. And if this happened to us through other places when you were leaving, you take all your clothes off and wrap them up with the sleeve you got. And they had built on the back of a building, they had a great big steel oven, and they put all your clothes in there. the fire's going on underneath, just an open fire, while they send you down to get a shower, 3-minute shower. And when we got in there was nothing. And we kept looking up in the ceiling and see a lot of little holes in it. It makes you wonder what's coming, either gas or water. And after a while, the water comes out, and then we get 2 minutes to wash. We had no soap or no towels, and we went just run up there bare naked. And then we got said the last time was finally washing us up and get out. And we had to run down the back again to find our clothes. And when we did get them, well, you had to shake them because they'd dried up a lot of stuff that you know. And then they took us over to this building, and there's no beds, nothing like that, just sleep on the floor. So there were 1,500 of us that slept on the floor, and we never got anything there at all. They gave us at one time a piece of the, what do they call that stuff?
What to sleep on?
We grow them in the garden too, but anyway, it doesn't make any difference.
Oh, the beets?
That's all we got. We never got any bread or any water or anything.
What was your weight? Because you started out, when you went in, what did you weigh, 165?
Yeah, yeah.
What was your weight then?
At that time, we were down to about 120, no, 110.
110 pounds?
Yeah, and we got nothing there hardly at all. No bread, we didn't get anything. And they run out of everything, and the last 3 days that we were there, they just left us. The Germans left us, and then the Russians came in the next day, and they come in with tanks and everything, and dropped everything, and threw a few bombs around, and then they started to tell us that our army in France was dead, that once they finished with Belgium, or with Berlin, they're going to go right through to France and take up. And we said to him, "Oh, what do you think the army's going to do?" Oh, he said, "That army's gone." He said, "They're no good." But anyway, there was quite a lot of Russians that had been picked up earlier, and they were skinny as rails. And they took them out, and they took the tank and went over a lot of the wire. And then they got these young fellas that had been prisoners of war, and they put them on the back of the tanks, gave them a gun, and said they're going to Berlin. So that's how much they liked their own kids. And we kept on there, and I got first of all, an American armored car came in, and there was just two of them, an officer and just a boy with him. And he got up on the top to talk to us, because there's about 40,000 people rushed him to see what he was. And then he told us that he come to find out how many trucks they needed for to take them all. He was talking about the Americans alone. And there's 82,000 by this time in there. And I suppose maybe there might have been 2,000. That's about all. anyway, they kept on saying they're going to get us food, and then this American that said he was going back to find out how many trucks he could get to take the Americans back. And after 2 days he came up, so just three trucks. And he pulled one of the truck inside, put it against a building, and waited for the Americans to come out, run out, and get on. And then 2 or 3 young fellows came on, and they started jumping around and saying, "Oh, we're going home, we're going home." And the Russian officer came out, and he said, "To get off that truck." "No," he said, these young people said, "No, we're going home." He said, "I said, get off." And they wouldn't get off. So he steps back and he pulls his gun out and went bang, 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 right above their heads. And he said, now they moved. And then he turned around to the driver of the truck and he said, "You either get out through that gate and go back from where you came and tell the other fellows the same thing." He said, "Otherwise," he said, "you'll get put in a jail." So they left anyway, and left us, and that set me off. That I said, "Hell with this! If that's the way they're gonna handle us, I'm gonna." I thought they were our allies, but they kept telling us how bad our own army is. So I thought I'm gonna take off, and which I did actually, and I tried to get my buddy to go with me, but he said he was too tired, he couldn't go. And I said, "Well, it's only 50 miles." I said, "Well, what are you going to do to eat?" I said, "Well, what have we been doing before?" I said, "We got nothing to eat now." "Well, why are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going." And so I knew how to get out without them knowing. But while I went back to the place where I'd been playing on the floor, and a young fella come up and tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, I heard you're talking with your friend." He said, "He wouldn't go with you." I said, "No." He said, "Well," they said, "would you take me?" And he was only about no more than 21 anyway. And I said, "Do you want to go?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Well, come up and meet me at 10. "Well, how are we going to get up?" I said, "You just come up here." I said, "I'll worry about getting up." And so when he came at 10 o'clock, and we had fixed a part of the wiring before, and we had to get on our back and just squirrel yourself out on the road. And that's what I did. And the 2 of us took off, and we had no water, nothing, and hadn't had anything for 3 days. And I said, "Well, we can't go out now because the Russians are on the road and blocked it. So we got to go around, go over the different places we had to go through, and then nobody was living in these places anyway, and we just went over the fields until I thought it was midnight when we got down there. I said, "Let's go over and see if we can find the way to go." So we got out there, and we found out it was right, and we started down that road, and we'd go. That night we went till dawn, and then we went in for a rest, And we kept like that for the next 3 days. But the third day, I thought we were getting closer than what did. And so we kept on walking, and we got to a place where we could stand up and hide, and to see what's going on, if there's anything. And while we were getting up in there, we could hear something coming. It was too heavy for. It wasn't a tank or anything like that. And so I said, well, we'll just hide till he comes down and see what it is. Well, he kept on coming, and then finally there was a little thing in the road, and when he come over that hump, I could see a big white star on the hood, and I knew then it was an American. It was a Jeep. And so we waited till he got close, and then we started to yell, and he pulled up and got his gun out, and he said, who are you? We said, we're 2 Canadians, POWs. Well, come out and let me see you. So we stepped out, and he looked at us. He said, come on down. And he looked at Mac and he said, where are you from? He said, somewhere in Halifax. And, he said, oh, hell, I don't know that part of the country. Where are you from? I said, Simcoe, Ontario. And he gave me a funny look, and I thought maybe I'd said something wrong. And then he come down, and he said, what's the road that goes through Simcoe? And I said, well, there's only one, is number 3. And he started to laugh there. He said, I'm from Buffalo. He said, I know Simcoe just as well as I do Buffalo. So he said, come on, get down. He said, I'll take you. I said, well, how far is it to where we're going, over the river? He said, well, it's about 4 miles. So we had walked the 46 miles in those 3 days. And we were both beat when we got there, and so a thing happened that they had fellas, we couldn't see them. They wanted to stop the Russians getting over on the American side, and they had their men in the hedges with magazines and the guns all out. And we went in there, and while we were standing there waiting to get the okay to go on, the guy come out of there was an old building, a stone building, and this guy come out, and I'll swear he had a sandwich that thick with white bread and beef. I guess I must have been looking at it, because he come over and he said, buddy, are you hungry? I said, I haven't had anything down for 6 days. And he goes back in and he comes out with 2 sandwiches, 1 each. And Mac ate this, and I took a piece of mine and threw it right back up. I couldn't hold it down. So then he took us on, and after that, it was just a matter of getting cleaned up, and which I did, getting well trained by an American officer. And then a few days after that, they put us on the way home. Took us to Hanover, and then they had running aircraft from Hanover to Belgium. And
when you crossed, back up a little bit, when you had the sandwich and all that, and I know that when we had talked, you come to a point in the river though after that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a critical point to your story, because that's when I learned a lot about what you represent and what you're all about. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, that was when we got freed, really, and but there's a lot of Americans around, and he said, just if you want to go down to our base, he said, just hop into one of the cars or trucks that are going there. So I did, and I went down, and when I got out, I was the only one that got out, and then there was 6 of us in there, and I thought it funny. And so this officer come over and asked me if I was a POW, and I said, yeah. And I said, well, what about those other 6 that are in there? And he laughed. He said, they were Germans. I said, well, you know, I thought I knew one of them. I said, I'm sure that he was one of the guards that we had. And it turned out it was. The whole 6 of them were Germans in civilian clothes. And so anyway, this officer, he said, well, what can I do for you? I said, you can give me a bed with a nice, nice white what did I say now? Anyway, with the bed, the nice bed, and a mattress, and then something white for clothes. He said, come on with me. And he said these huts were for German officers and in time when they get these young women in there. And he said, so we threw all their stuff out and put new in. And so he took me over to one. He said, you can have this one tonight. And he took me in this nice place. And he said, I could see this bed there with a mattress about that thick, and there was even a toilet. And I said, that's the first time I've seen a flush toilet since we left England. And he said, well, over here you can have a hot shower any time you want. And then he said, you can do what you want. You can sleep on there, and we'll see you the next day. So well, I went in and I got my shower, my hot shower, and then I cleaned all my clothes. My shoes were dirty, and my socks and everything. I washed them all, and the next day I was ready to go and try to eat something. But the only thing I could eat was a piece of bread, and I tried an egg, and I could take a piece of toast, and I could swallow part of that, but I couldn't take the egg for a couple of days.
When you and Mac were at that crossroads.
Yep, we went back and took us back by truck to Hanover, and from Hanover we were getting an aircraft right to Brussels, and from Brussels we were taken up with the truck to the Canadian Army. They had a special place for the Red Cross were there, and the Army were taking all our clothes and giving us all brand new stuff, new shoes and everything, and we could get a shower or whatever, and then he said, just throw your clothes out that window. And I thought, well, that's funny. And with as many as we were, about 40 of us come up together. And every one of us had to throw the shoes and everything. So I said to him, I said, why are you throwing them out there? He said, go and have a look. And I went and looked out the window, and there were the Belgians, a streak of them, at least 100 or more, and they were coming up 2 at a time, going through the pile of stuff that we had thrown out. They were taking shoes, whatever else they could get. And I thought, my God, well, at least we're doing a little bit of good giving them some clothes.
Didn't you tell me once, too, your pants were so thin at the end of the war you could read a newspaper through them?
Hmm?
You told me once that at the end of the war your pants were so thin you could read a newspaper
Yes,
through them.
yeah.
It was just, there was not much left. At what point during all that, Ike, did you realize you were a free man?
Hmm?
At what point, you know, when you escape, you and Mac escape, and the Jeep comes, and you get food, at what point did you realize that maybe you were a free man again?
Well, I knew it by the look of the people I had, like I could see. But for me, I couldn't. I was all alone, and I don't know what is happening. And so I sat down on the road and cried. And then I got up, and I was fine. After that, I had no problem.
And with those marches,
Yeah.
when you look back at those marches now,
Yeah.
I mean, you told me that sometimes resources were so scarce that you guys would literally lick dew off the grass in the morning, and you were pulling, what were they called? The sweet beets? Is that what they
Yeah.
were? And chewing on those as you walked.
Yeah, we saw them on there were a lot of the trucks were going along. They lost a lot of stuff, and when the guards weren't looking, we could go and dash in and grab the whole thing, and they were frozen anyway, and we'd take it till we got to the stop of that night, and then we'd pound it on the ground to break it up and then eat it. That was the what did they call them?
Were they sweet beets? I think you said?
I can't.
Yeah, they were.
Names fly off me.
So when you guys are doing these forced marches, what happened if you fell down? What went on?
Hmm?
If you were doing a forced march, like those last ones you did near the end of the war, if somebody who had dysentery was really sick and they fell down, did they get help? Did they?
Oh yeah.
They help them back up, or would they just leave them at the side of the road?
We often had fellows go down and they got sick, and they wouldn't do anything with us.
And you, when you got back home, I know that you and I, after the war, you and Kay got married, and I remember you telling me when you got back home how thin you were and how long it took you. You said almost a year before you could eat properly.
Yeah, it took me I think 2 or 3 months before I could swallow.
Before you could swallow it.
And yeah, and once it started, I was all right. But
I don't think a lot of people realize after the war what you did locally, with what you did with other folks, other fellows who came home from the war, helping the Benevolent Society. Was that what you did? With the guys that came back, and you helped them with their.
Oh yeah. Well,
maybe talk a little bit about that, because.
I just walked down through Simcoe, and the fellow said to me, "Oh," he said, "you're just a man." I said, "What do you mean, just a man? I just got here." And he said, "Well," he said, I'm taking in some stuff from a company." He said it was a company, but it wasn't a company. It was part of the Ottawa. They had the place there, and what they were doing was seeing if people. There was a lot of fellows that at the end of the war, a lot of them had good money, and they were blowing it, and then they were asking for help, and so I got the job for the area from Simcoe to Brantford to Aylmer and down to Jarvis at Elf in the Mountain. I did it all at night time, and
So was it just the guys that were down on their luck that you'd help sort of get their lives back together?
Yes, and I guess that's why I'm getting a medal tomorrow or Sunday for that. I think they're doing it for other people that helped other people too. So
That's Diane Finley, you were saying earlier. Yeah, that's pretty cool. You're back after the war. You raised your family, you and your wife, and you continued.
I got a job with Imperial Tobacco, and I stayed there right till I retired, and had a very good time. I got a good job. I bought a lot of tobacco, and then I prepared it a lot too for going over into Far East and other places.
It's a pretty amazing story what you've been through in your life to be a young man and to go and face all those hardships. And I think you probably, I think you must have had an angel on your shoulder to get through all the stuff that you went through, and to come out and look at you and all the good stuff you've done in our community since then.
Yes, well, it was just helping people that needed it. A lot of fellows, young fellows, some of them got a commission, and they walked out with quite a lot of money. And then they go and blow it or get drunk, and there was all kinds of things. I went to Brantford several times, and this guy that he got a girl in, and she had the baby, and after that he didn't want her, and she was left there without any food, and so I took her out and let her order what she wanted, and I went looking for him, and I knew he worked with the office.
Post office?
The post. And so I went to the post office, and I asked him if he seen him. He said, "Yeah, look through that window." And I looked through the window, and there he was with a bottle of wine in his hand, and he was gone out of it. So.
Are you feeling up to a few questions, if there's some?
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions for Ike?
So.
Don't be shy.
That's about my life in that time.
Oh, pretty amazing.
Anything you want, and ask me, go ahead.
Ike's going to be 97 in what, 4 months, 5 months?
No.
And he's finally going to slow down a little bit, aren't you?
Hmm?
You're finally going to slow down a little bit. You're retiring, I guess we should say.
Well, I'm 96, and it's pretty hard to remember things at times.
Well, I got to thank you, Ike, for letting me do this. Oh, is there? I'm sorry. Couldn't see.
Mr. Hewitt, I just want to say personally thank you for your service to our country. It was long before I was born, but the story is really moving. And I guess my question for you is, you mentioned, when you were stuck in the ocean, that, you weren't afraid of dying, or you never thought of that. Were there other times? Because as I hear your story, it's so amazing to me that you survived so much of that. I doubt that I could. Were there times that you were afraid for your life?
Was there times where you were afraid that you may die, Ike?
Did I what?
Was there times that you were afraid that you may not make it?
What?
Or die?
Oh no, they didn't make it. Oh,
you weren't worried?
Quite a few of the fellows of mine that died there. Some of them will never get the march that we had was. It took a few lives.
But did you yourself, Ike, at any point have that fear of dying?
Well, yeah, it comes back, and you just have to forget it. I made a book that
Yeah.
while I think we got the book in 1933 from the one of the clubs, and the book about that thick and just plain, and so I started. That I get friends at home that would like to know what happened to me. So I started out asking other people to put something in the book. Some of them I paid with cigarettes because I didn't smoke anyway, even though I worked for 35 years with Imperial Tobacco, and I still didn't smoke. And so they wanted I'd give them, pay them with cigarettes, and we had when you get 80, that many people together, there was a lot of fellows that worked for companies in London, England, and they were good fellows for put funny things up in. And the first one I asked in the I knew that he had been shot in the lungs here, and he had to stay in bed. But I saw that he liked to draw, and he had a pencil. So I said to him one day, "How about putting them in my book?" He said, "Oh," he said, "Oh, that's nice. I got nice stuff to work on," and so he took my book and he put the first one in the pages, and then he did 2 or 3 more. So then I gave him some cigarettes so that he can swap somebody for something else. See? And that's the way I went through, asking people if they want to write something in here, and they all did, and so I've got a book about like that. And there were some people that took it out, and I thought they were going to, well, they did take photographs of all, they were going to make a book out of that, but it fell through, and so I've still got it at home, but it's starting to fall apart, so I've got to find somebody that can fix it for me. But otherwise, everything's in there, and it's a big cover to all what we did and how we did it.
And the stamp on that front page of that book is pretty unique too, isn't it, Ike?
Well,
the stamp that was made for it. The journal itself that he's talking about it's basically Ike's life in a POW camp, but it's, like he said, there's so many other stories in it, and he's given me the opportunity once or twice to look at it. And one of the stories that caught my eye was a couple Australians talking about the fireflies at night, how they light up the sky and everything's dark, and just the amazement. They said the Germans can't turn off the fireflies, and there's little stories like that in there that are just incredible, and the artwork's phenomenal. And I carried that with him through these marches and everything, and kept it close to him. And it's kind of your Bible. It's kind of who you are, isn't it? Yeah. And it's very unique in that aspect, but there's a lot of history in there. And there's even some camera photos in there, which was really crazy to see. So, an amazing book, that's for sure.
They asked these 2 fellows that had been in the business of photography before they got in the army, and they asked the German first if they could ask the Red Cross if they could give them a camera and all the stuff that they would need to make pictures, and they did that. And they sold the pictures for 1 cigarette apiece. So that's why I've got a few hundred pictures, and I've got they're all in the book. And I survived, so the book is there now, but it's at home right now, but I've got to get somebody that can fix it for me to get it back. Because Ottawa have been asking about it, but I just made it so I could let my neighbors read it if they wanted, but it needs a little bit of work now. But I've got one picture in there that a fellow drew for me, and I didn't know that he was a proper until I read in the paper about him, and then the Queen making a man out of him or something, and he died shortly after. I read that in the paper, but he did from where we were living, I could look across like that, and the barbed wire was there, but there was a tree there, and it was really nice when in the summertime. So then when I asked him if he wanted, and I gave him cigarettes, and he said he'll do that, and it's a beautiful job. And everybody that sees it says like it. So that's what I got. It's still in the book.
Is that the frost picture? Is that one?
Well, I'll make an apology for my missing things, because I do that every day. I just, yeah, I know them in the morning, and by noon, I'm gone.
Is there any, before we go, Ike, is there any advice you'd offer for today's generation about war? About what we can do to
I've just sold my home, and I'm going to gotta go to a place in Delhi. So that's why my house is a mess right now, because the girls have been getting what they want, and so on. So anyway.
Well, thanks for doing this, Ike. Getting you out tonight. I know we're keeping you out late, but I hope you had fun. And thanks for everybody for sharing, letting Ike share his story.